The president made some pretty bold statements today in the Oval Office when he was with President Bong Bong, and I mean he said Barack Obama is the ringleader and Hillary Clinton was right there, and he went on to say that President Obama rigged the election and basically led a coup against him. So let's start with this idea first of all of are these accusations that I think by now we're all familiar with that Tulsi Gabbard laid out. Would they rise to that level of treason or a coup or anything else like that?
I mean, in a common sense, sure. Would they actually meet the technical level of treason required to prove the crime in a court of law? No, but they amount to a conspiracy against rights. What Tulsi Gabbard established with her release of documents was that Obama and most of the top, the top people in his administration, the leaders of his intelligence community, came up with, fabricated an intelligence report that was directly contrary to the one generated by their own intelligence community a few months before the election. The intelligence community had said repeatedly, Russia is not doing any sort of cyber hack into the election. And the report generated after that, at the direction of people like Obama and Brennan and Clapper, said the exact opposite. And the goal of that was to bring in the Steele dossier and to ship that off the DOJ and to create the possibility of subverting and undermining the incoming administration and potentially even leading to Trump being in prison. That's a classic conspiracy against rights, using corrupt means to try and deprive someone else of their liberty. That's a crime, even if it's not treason under our law. It's still a serious federal crime.
Is there a statute of limitations on it?
There is a statute of limitations. I believe it's 5 years, like for most. But the thing about a conspiracy is that that statute of limitations starts tolling with the very last act of the conspiracy. So if that continued on with anybody in the group doing anything, facilitating that going forward, that might not even have stopped tolling.
What would you recommend that they do now? I mean, is this now a matter for Congress? Is this a matter for the DOJ? Is it a matter for both?
Both. I think there should be a congressional investigation into what was done, because that obviously reflects on a legislative priority for this Congress, what should be done to the intelligence community to prevent this from happening again. So there's a legitimate legislative purpose to conduct an investigation with. And then there should be a simultaneous concurrent DOJ investigation into potential crimes.
Your friend and colleague Mike Davis said yesterday that the presidential immunity would not cover Barack Obama. If he did do these things, if he was involved in this, presidential immunity would not cover him because this took place essentially after he was president. Although I think a lot of this took place while he was president, but the heart of it at 2017 and going forward, he was already out of the White House then at that point. So there's no immunity for him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go against my own boss on this, but I suspect that the presidential immunity question will be a little closer than Mike suggests. I think it'll be I think it would be interesting if it got to that point, because you have to parse out what is an official act and what isn't, based on what the Supreme Court said. And certainly interacting with your own Department of Justice, your own intelligence community, is something the president does in their official capacity every day. So there's going to be that, and then they still haven't. I mean, this presidential immunity decision really is just a one-off, and it kind of set out a framework, but it didn't really apply it in a lot of situations. So, I don't think, is this going to be core Article 2 acts that would be completely immune? Is this going to be general official acts, which would maybe be immune, maybe not? I mean, it's hard to say. So I think it'll be a closer question than my boss might have suggested. Who knows?
Understood. And we'll keep this between us, so you don't have to worry about getting.
Yeah. This isn't public or anything.
Right? No, it's just totally.
Sorry, Mike. If this gets out in public, you're totally right. I'm wrong.
It's all good, Will. We're just going to drop that from the podcast. Don't sweat it. Now, what Tulsi Gabbard's alleging here, and she said there's more to come. Obama obviously has responded to this and said, this is ridiculous. Brennan, Clapper, Comey, I mean, all these people are denying all this. I guess the first question I have is, why didn't all this come out in the first term when we had control of the DOJ? We had control of everything, really. Why is this taking so long now to see the light of day?
I think a big part of it, there's two dynamics. The first is that the first Trump administration was just playing defense against all this stuff. The very stuff that's the subject of this investigation. Like they were on defense with the Mueller investigation from moment one. They probably weren't trying to press this stuff because people were worried they'd get subpoenaed and brought into the Mueller investigation, which would lead to criminal charges against them. So, basically the sort of Obama world, even though Trump had won the White House, the Obama world had initiative. They were taking the lead, and it was the Trump people responding to it. Now that we're 4 years on, Trump's in his second term, his control over the executive branch is much stronger. His influence over Congress is much stronger. You remember it was Republican congressmen in the first term who were hard behind the Mueller investigation, extremely skeptical of Trump, putting a lot of pressure on him. That dynamic's totally changed. Republican Congress is behind Trump now, as far as I can tell, 100%. So they have the time to take the initiative on their own. They're not really facing the same level of attack. So I think they're just in a much stronger position, and they don't feel like they have incoming coming at them from all directions.
And in case somebody's been living under a rock, Will Chamberlain, and basically it goes like this. They knew the Russia thing was nonsense, but they decided that they were going to make it a real thing. I mean, not real is the wrong word, but they were going to pretend that it was credible. They were going to push this out there and go with this narrative, even though the CIA and the national security people had said, this is nonsense. And the guy who really was pushing this was Comey and the FBI. And then somebody said, okay, then we'll go with this and we'll push this narrative, which then, of course, led to the Mueller report and $100,000 maybe of taxpayer dollars being wasted on this and trying to drive the presidency to a halt. So that really is the issue, that there was a conclusion by the intelligence community that this was all made up. This is BS. But the FBI said, no, we disagree with that. We want to go forward on this. And they said, okay, fine. I mean, is that a fair, kind of a summary of how this played out?
I mean, that's part of it. I mean, it's not just the FBI. It seems pretty clear that there's some hidden discussion where the FBI made this decision, and then everybody decided to flip, and the people who did the original analysis in the intelligence community are like, what?
Yeah.
All their bosses are going along with this FBI nonsense when they're the ones in the position to make these assessments. So I think it's a little more of a dramatic about face from the community, from the intelligence community, the heads of the intelligence community, rather, that was spitting in the face of the lying people.
Oh, I agree. I mean, in my mind, it's like they all got together and did one of these with their hands and said, okay, ready, go team, and left the room and said, we're going to move forward on this Russia stuff. But that's the reason why right now we're talking about this again is that there was this intersection where they had said there's nothing there, and other people said, no, we want there to be something there, and they won out, and they pushed this, and the people at the top of the intelligence chain, Comey, Clapper, and other people whose names we may not have heard yet, they said, okay, fine, let's do this, so let's move the ball on this, even though their own conclusions were that this was BS. And that's where you get into this idea of a conspiracy then at that moment, because then they all went with this, and they had their marching orders at that point. And then for years they were on television saying this. They were saying this every time somebody gave them the opportunity. They were out there driving this point that Trump was a Russian asset.
Yeah, no, that's right. And that is the essence of the conspiracy, right? What you would assess is the agreement by all these people to push forward with a narrative, to put lies out into the public sphere that accused President Trump and his campaign of very serious crimes. And they knew it was false. They knew that the things they were saying were not true. And yet push forward with that anyway, to the point of getting a special counsel investigation predicated on those falsehoods launched.
And manufactured intelligence. That was a key point of what DNI Director Tulsi Gabbard said, that it wasn't just a matter of covering things up. I mean, they manufactured intelligence. They created this. And I mean, if you can prove that, then, I mean, it's case closed, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's still a question of does conspiracy against rights apply in this circumstance? I mean, obviously going after a president in this way hasn't really been dealt with, but if you just read the statute and you look at what was done, I mean, there's nothing more corrupt than the fabrication of intelligence information. I think any jury and any prosecutor would look at that and say, if we need corrupt intent or corrupt means to prove the statute or prove this crime, we have it.
Yeah, it's one thing for Comey or Clapper to go on MSNBC and spout their lying mouths about their personal belief that they believe Trump to be a Russian asset. It's another thing for them to use their official capacity to try to convince people that he's a Russian asset, and then to use information that they had that was manufactured to then go out there and give themselves credibility when they're going on TV and saying these things.
Right.
You know, this isn't like constitutionally protected speech. I mean, I know lots of people during the first campaign who were convinced that Trump was some sort of Putin plant because they heard people like Comey and Clapper and Brennan and all these other people out there on TV saying this with the credibility of having been there in the room looking at all this information.
Right. I mean, free speech doesn't protect you from, a fraud charge, for example. Like, you can't appeal to free speech when you lie to somebody to get them to buy something. That's fraud. Free speech doesn't apply in a lot of circumstances if you are lying and then using that lie in service of either some, material gain or to hurt someone else. That another good example would be defamation, right? Free speech doesn't protect you from defamation, especially. I mean, there's more protection because of certain Supreme Court rulings, but the basic idea is that no, if you lie about someone and do real damage to their reputation, you can be held accountable for that. And there's civil and criminal ways in which that can happen in various contexts. So here it would be if you're lying about someone and using, not merely lying about them, but creating a whole set of officially authorized and approved lies that are lies, and then using those to try and get somebody prosecuted and put them in jail. That's illegal.
At the very least, then, I guess, if you can't get it to the conspiracy that you first brought up, Will Chamberlain, and it's great to have you on the show here today. Will Chamberlain, Article 3 Project, is my guest. Follow him on X at Will Chamberlain, one of the smartest legal minds out there. It would certainly seem to me then that if Brennan and Clapper are out there in MSNBC all the time spouting this nonsense and they know it's false, then that's defamation, and Trump could sue them civilly, I think, at the very least, right?
Yeah, he has the potential for a civil lawsuit. I mean, and also the fact that, it's interesting. You actually normally have to prove actual malice, and that's usually the biggest challenge, proving that somebody knowingly lied or is knowingly spreading falsehoods. But here you actually have some evidence of that.
Yeah.
Thanks to the DNI and the uncover of all these emails that are now being put forward. I mean, you could say we know based on all this evidence we have, you were told what the actual truth of the matter was. You directed your own intelligence community to publish something that you knew wasn't true. That is the definition of actual malice, knowing falsehood. And
then you went on Rachel Maddow's show 700 times, and the Sunday shows and every other show that would have you, and you pushed that lie out there, and you knew it was false. So, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but that sounds to me like you've met the threshold there. And
that also could be that solves the statute of limitations problem too that we were talking about earlier. If every time you're continuing to repeat the very same falsehoods that were part of the original conspiracy to attempt to get this guy imprisoned, even if it's not feasible now, that doesn't mean it's not still ultimately part of the same conspiracy. And maybe the theory, you could argue that the theory is that conspiracy against President Trump's rights is still ongoing because they're hoping to ultimately lead to a prosecution if he finally leaves the White House.
You and I have not spoken since the Supreme Court ruled on the issue of federal judges making these nationwide injunctions. I'm sure you're very happy with the Supreme Court's decision on that.
Great decision.
Yeah, great decision. Is that kind of case closed on that then?
Yeah, I mean, it puts a big stop and a big block on a lot of the injunctions that we've seen happening. And the big block now is, and I'm trying to get familiar with this, is can these people get class action certified? Because it doesn't eliminate the possibility of all group litigation. We've had class action litigation for quite a long time, and there are origins of that class action litigation all the way back in British common law. But there are requirements, because if you're in a class, you're going to be binding people who aren't present in court. You're going to be binding non-parties. And there's a whole set of due process rules that protect those non-parties from having their rights adjudicated in a situation where they don't have notice and they don't have an opportunity to be heard. And those protections are things like the person who's standing up to represent the class has to be similarly situated to everybody else. His claims have to be very similar. He needs to not have unique circumstances that apply to him and not other people. Broadly speaking, the class's claims all have to be roughly the same. So there's a lot of different requirements, and those protections don't exist. And those requirements don't exist in the context where these judges were just issuing nationwide injunctions, ordering the executive branch to follow the law vis-a-vis everyone, not just the parties in front of them.
Do you have a 30,000-foot take on the whole Epstein matter?
Yeah, my take is the contrarian one, which says, what if we were wrong and maybe this guy was not actually doing a lot of these awful things with many people beyond Ghislaine Maxwell and maybe one or two other close associates. I think that's, you know, there's there's a lot of people who suspect that this was a broad ring, but to me it's not. That's not obvious. And I think the other one is that I trust people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. We put them in there for a reason. If you had told us, a year ago that Dan Bongino was going to be deputy director of the FBI and in a position to review the Epstein files, I would have been like, that's fantastic. And we'll really get to know what the truth is as a result of that. And I guess the other point I would have is that I think Kash and Dan made a lot of claims when they were private citizens about what would be present in the Epstein files and what could be done. And now that they're sitting in office, the fact that they're having to kind of eat crow a little bit and really step back from those earlier claims is kind of an admission against interest. If they would be a lot happier and their lives would be easier if they could go out and say, aha, look at what we found. We told you we were right and they were all lying and covering it up. They'd be in much better shape. I think that I'm sort of the belief that, I trust Dan and Kash, and the fact that they've said there really is not a lot more material that we're going to be able to release here. And the ultimate conclusion is Epstein killed himself, and we don't have good evidence of a broader blackmail scheme. I mean, I think the odds of that are actually a lot higher than I would have assessed prior to this administration taking office.
Which is fair. And I think there's a lot of people that agree with you. I guess the two questions then that kind of spring off of that would be, number one, what then do they intend to learn from Maxwell that they haven't already learned? And number two, what is the issue of Congress releasing the quote unquote Epstein files that has now led the speaker to say, come back in September?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with what the specific congressional dynamic, but I can talk about Maxwell. So, my suspicion is that there was already an attempt to discuss. I mean, I know that Todd Blanche put out a statement that DOJ hadn't talked with Maxwell, but I don't know that that's true in the sense that maybe the prosecutors in the previous case did, the Queen for a day thing where they go in for a proffer, because they're not allowed to use that material. And really the whole idea is that it's supposed to be kind of, a chance for the criminal defendant to just explain everything they might have on anybody else in order to negotiate some sort of plea bargain. And I'd really be surprised if that didn't happen in the Epstein case, right? That there wasn't some effort by DOJ to try and get a sense. And if there was such an effort in the prior administration or during the prior prosecution, then all that means is what she was able to provide wasn't sufficient to justify a plea agreement, and that they just were like, no, this isn't worth it. We're just going to prosecute you for the crimes you committed.
Before I let you go and I'll just say the one thing on the Epstein thing. I think it had Pam Bondi not come out and did the Binder show.
Yeah, that was silly.
Yeah, I mean,
that was silly.
Many more people would be willing to agree with the assessment of saying Kash and Dan looked at the evidence and they made their conclusion, and that the Binder show was ridiculous.
Agreed.
On the note of and now it just escaped me, but I was going to ask you about another pending case. Oh, I know, Judge Bove, your friend, your friend, who Cory Booker had a tantrum about. Yes. Where does that stand right now?
I think he's out of committee, and he's going to face a full confirmation hearing by the full Senate soon. I'd be very surprised if we didn't get him confirmed, but it's always good to remind your senators to go ahead and make sure they know that they should be confirming Emma Bovey. He's a wonderful judge. He'll be a wonderful judge. He's a brilliant guy, and a very, very competent guy, and brave in a way that we need more of on the bench. We need people who are willing to take courageous stances. And people forget it was a big career risk for people to be willing to defend President Trump in the aftermath in 2023 in the midst of all these prosecutions, because people were sure he was going to go to jail. And it was clear that the Biden administration was just no holds barred with anybody associated with Trump. So it was a very bold thing for him to do, and he did it anyway. And he prevailed on any number of claims. And I mean, there was only the one successful criminal prosecution, and that one was easily the most absurd of the bunch, the one in New York over the Stormy Daniels stuff. So he's a great lawyer. He's a courageous guy. He's done a great job at DOJ handling all the incoming coming from all the lefty lawfare, and he'll be a great judge.
And if Cory Booker's having a grandstanding tantrum, then we definitely need him confirmed, if nothing else.
Amen.
Will Chamberlain,
Amen.
always a pleasure to chat with you, my friend. Follow him on X at Will Chamberlain and check out the Article 3 project. Thanks so much, Will.
Thanks for having me, Rich.